Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Message and messenger, I think, the next conversation. Tony Blair is probably not the person that most people would have chosen to lead or to launch a mission to persuade Britons to rise up and change their minds on Brexit. Actually, I'll correct that. I suspect a lot of people on the other side of the argument might have chosen him, such as the post-weapons of mass destruction, post-Iraq war, and very carefully nurtured, of course, by the media in this country. But also he did. He dropped the ball on an epic scale. I supported that war because I believed elements of what we were being told. I used to have these very carefully thought out logical devices about if you could only line up 10 murderous dictators against the wall and kill one of them, why wouldn't you just kill one of them, even if you haven't gone after Kim Jong-un or Robert Mugabe? God, I was young and naive. So that's why his approval ratings posthumously, crikey, don't get ahead of yourself, post-career approval ratings, I think are currently even lower than David Cameron's, just in terms of how people feel about him now. Most people's lives got a lot better under Tony Blair. It may be an odd thing to say at the moment, but most people's lives did. And right up until the financial crisis in 2008, when Gordon Brown was in charge, most people were doing pretty well. Global financial crisis, boom, everything's out. And he has taken it upon himself today to launch this mission to persuade Britons to rise up and change their minds on Brexit. I'm going to find out what you think about that imminently. I appreciate you might not have heard all of the speech. Vinnie McAviney, LBC's reporter, did hear it all, and he joins me on the line now. Give me the highlights, Vincent.
Well, Tony Blair himself admitted it was a surreal situation that he was standing here at Bloomberg, where David Cameron a few years ago stood and promised an EU referendum. He said he wasn't making personal criticism of the PM or the government, but said that when we voted to leave the EU, people didn't know which way the government was going to take us and what we could potentially lose.
The people voted without knowledge of the terms of Brexit. As these terms become clear, it is their right to change their mind. Our mission is to persuade them to do so.
So Tony Blair said that the government is currently being controlled by the ideologues within it who are at the steering wheel. And he says that they don't know, and Theresa May doesn't know where she's going, and that she can't now back down, it seems.
This jumble of contradictions shows that the Prime Minister and government are not masters of this situation. They're not driving this bus, they're being driven. And as we pass each milestone, so the landscape in which we are operating changes, not because we willed the change, but because this is the direction in which the bus is traveling. We will trigger Article 50, not because we now know our destination, but because the politics of not doing so would alienate those driving the bus.
He also said that the key issue of immigration hasn't been resolved by Brexit, and he quoted the new US president.
It was Donald Trump, no less, who said that without the refugees from Syria, I quote, you probably wouldn't have a Brexit. It is no coincidence that the infamous immigration poster of Leave was a picture of Mr. Farage in front of a line of Syrian refugees. Thus, we have moved in a few months from a debate about what sort of Brexit, involving a balanced consideration of all the different possibilities, to the primacy of one consideration, namely controlling immigration, without any real discussion as to why, and when Brexit doesn't affect the immigration people most care about. However, we're told we just have to stop debating Brexit and just do it.
He's right, isn't he? Shut up and move on is the message. It's one that Tony Blair fairly violently rejects there. It's a little early to say what sort of reception he might receive across the country, but give me an idea of the reception in the room and Mr. Blair's, well, I suppose, familiarity with the podium, Vinny, but back in the game after quite a long layoff.
Yeah, it's sort of the annual return of Tony Blair to dip his toe into British politics to see what his reputation is like. And he was really questioning this morning whether the referendum had delivered a mandate to Brexit at any cost. He was trying to put it in a kind of global political significance and said it was the only time in his life when he worried that basic democracy was at risk around the world if the UK left the EU and the implications that would have for the rise of China. And he had quite an interesting analogy in the Q&A session afterwards. He said what the British people did last year was decided that they wanted to do a house swap. And one estate agent said, it's a great house, you'll love it. The other said, no, it's terrible, you won't. And now we've decided we're going to do it. We're going to see the house and we realise it's in a dodgy neighbourhood, it's got bad wiring, the rooms aren't good and its bathroom's broken. And it's like saying that, no, you've got to just stick with it now because you decided that and that's it. So he was really this morning trying to open up this question that democracy doesn't mean that debate is permanently shut down. And it's whether or not now people in the country will want to follow him.
Do we know what this campaign, what this mission is going to look like yet? I mean, is it going to be a sort of formal political movement? Is it Remain relaunched, or are we still waiting for flesh to be put on those particular bones?
Well, the one thing Tony Blair did categorically rule out this morning was the setting up of a new party. But interestingly, at one point, he did describe himself as a practicing politician. And we know he's divested himself of a lot of his international consultancy work. And he said last year that he was going to focus now on the UK. But it's still not clear this morning what exactly he's trying to do. He had a lot of criticism for Jeremy Corbyn's leadership of the Labour Party, saying there's no real opposition. And it was interesting. Nick Clegg immediately tweeted, I agree with everything Tony Blair said. Tony Blair said he agrees with what Nick Clegg has been saying. But there was no kind of structure, really, of what it was that Tony Blair was proposing. He is in the process of building up this new organisation himself to tackle this. But it doesn't seem clear yet from him as to what he's actually going to do himself about it, whether he could possibly return to the front line of British politics or not.
Vinnie McAvinnie, many thanks indeed for that analysis. I love that line about the house. Now, can we do this without shouting at each other? Shall we try? Because I quite like that analogy, and I think that gives us a way into this conversation that perhaps allows a slightly more, well, you know, my vain attempts to deal more in light than heat on this issue. This, by the way, is me spewing hate at the moment. Absolutely spewing hate and division. I don't know if you probably didn't notice that, but the kind of Trump extreme Brexit lobby, this is now me spewing hate and division, okay? When I say he's right, isn't he? That even if you voted to leave, you voted on the estate agent's description of the house. And now, well, best case scenario is you can't get into the house. You're still not quite sure whether the estate agent was telling you the truth. Worst case scenario, you've done a virtual tour of the house and it bears no resemblance whatsoever to the house you thought you were buying. Single market being the most obvious one. All of them. It's quite remarkable that anyone who ever talked about a Norway model or whoever said something along the lines of nobody is suggesting that we leave the single market. That's the big economic impact. Tony Blair mentioned that just months ago, the current Chancellor of the Exchequer described leaving the single market as catastrophic. And yet, not unlike the conversation about Donald Trump, there's just a massive disconnect between people who report facts like that. The Chancellor of the Exchequer thought it would be catastrophic. The Prime Minister that is conducting negotiations thought it would be disastrous. These sort of backseat drivers and hecklers. Great story around, I can't remember where I picked it up, but it was reputable, otherwise I wouldn't repeat it to you. Boris Johnson, when the first time he bumped into David Cameron after the vote, saying something like, I really messed up, didn't I? And that nugget right there, for me, is what the historians of the future will focus upon. It became a sort of common room battle between old Etonians about jostling and positioning. And then in the background, you had the really nasty characters, the kind of beery flatulence made flesh contingent who were really whipping up the hatred, who were really, as Tony Blair referred to, really putting out posters that were about as close to Nazi imagery as you can get without swastikas. And they, of course, are reaching over from the back seat and grabbing the wheel. And now I don't know who's got the wheel, and nor does Tony Blair. So, okay, what's wrong with another vote? 0345 60 973. Given that even Mr. Flatulence himself said that if it was 52-48, we should have another vote, I do find myself sort of thinking, well, hey, John Redwood said if it's really close, I don't think the issue's going to go away. I just can't quite conceive of how anybody at the moment can picture the so-called sunny uplands. So in the absence of the sunny uplands, it's all been replaced by, well, we knew it would be bad. We knew it would be bad. All of these things. no one ever told you that. I've been going back over it in my Anaraki way, looking for all the speeches where people said, we will really suffer. Andrea Leadsom said there'll be no economic impact whatsoever. I know this because I worked in the city for many years. No economic impact whatsoever. No one said the pound will plummet but we'll be okay. Nobody said the pound is currently overvalued, so you need to take a massive punch in the pocket before everything evens out again. Nobody said that. Nobody said you were probably going to have to pay tariffs under WTO rules during an interim period, and we might not be even able to do that. The clever analysis, by which I mean stuff sometimes that you read wincing, it's one of these great, what's the word I'm looking for? One of the great curses of seeking out uncomfortable news. Desperately unfashionable position to be in at the moment. But one of the great curses of seeking out unfashionable, unwelcome news is that it leaves you feeling worse than you did before you found it. The opposite of the Trump effect, if you will. You can just get online, find lots and lots of stuff to support the position you were already in. But the clever analysis of this seems to suggest that Theresa May is going to just have to march out of negotiations because she has nothing when she gets there. Absolutely nothing to negotiate with, except perhaps the future of human beings who in some cases have lived here for decades and who, as we established earlier this week, whose status is currently uncertain. That's probably all she's got. So when they start telling her what the deal is going to look like and she starts contemplating trying to sell that to the immigration-obsessed, fact-phobic lobby, which is there and loud, but by no means representative of everybody who voted leave. I'll say it till I'm blue in the face. Family members and my oldest friend, my cleverest friend, voted to leave. But when she actually is confronted with the reality of the negotiation, almost everybody with an insight into this process, and remember, we don't even have any trained negotiators yet. The EU's full of them. All of these simple things. It's just like the Trump press conference. He said, well, hang on, there's this and 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 that and that and this and that and that and this and this and this. How can you still think the way you do? Shut up, shut up, shut up. I do. I still think it, or Brexit or nout. And that's what Blair nailed today. This kind of, it doesn't actually matter what it looks like. I just want to get out. And again, you're left with the question of how many of those people are determined to be daft and how many are actually decent but disconcerted, decent but discomforted. How many are susceptible, if you like, to reason? Because if you've been reasoned into a position, you can be reasoned out of it. If you haven't been reasoned into a position, if your position is built upon emotion and rage or ignorance, you can't be reasoned out of it. Let's get the phone lines open. I've still got some people waiting to talk about Donald Trump. Donald Trump and Tony Blair. If I'd said to you 2 years ago, we'll be talking about the key political moments of our time, and the key players this morning are Donald Trump and Tony Blair, you'd have laughed in my face, wouldn't you? The key political moments of an epoch. And currently the main players in this conversation are Donald Trump and Tony Blair. Oh, I'm going to say it again. We'd be laughing if we weren't living it.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Tony Blair. I have people asking that question for a whole reason, for a whole list of reasons, as in sort of, oh, why Tony Blair? Couldn't someone else have done this? And the answer is probably no, for reasons that we'll examine momentarily. But before we crack on with this Brexit conversation, I just want to point something out to you. And it's going to sound like I'm boasting, but I promise you I'm not. When I'm boasting, I admit it. The reason why this particular radio programme has just recorded listening figures that, frankly, everyone in the industry has had to do triple takes at. The reason why more people under the age of 54 living in our capital city now listen to this programme than BBC Radio 4 at the same time. The reason why this is the most popular programme on the whole of commercial radio in London at this time, and the numbers are climbing across the country as well, is actually really simple. And it pains me to admit it. It's got very little to do with me. I've had to tell management to expect a decline again when the conversation picks up elsewhere. But there's been literally nowhere else you can go for an intelligent conversation about the possibility that leaving the European Union might prove to be a mistake. Everywhere else, you just get shouted at and insulted when you even start the conversation. Shut up, move on, Ramona. And part of the reason why we've been able to do it is that I've got skin like a rhinoceros. So, in fact, my ego is so overdeveloped, I find it flattering when people dedicate 3 hours of their day to abusing me. And that's why Tony Blair's had to do this. Because he's the one with the thick skin. He's the one who's already been traduced and seen his wife abused and had his family dragged over the coals by the right-wing media. He's the one who knows what's at stake here. And he's also the one who is financially in clover. So he doesn't worry about losing his career or losing his livelihood or losing one of his many, many, many houses. He's far from perfect. But he's the only contender for this position because of what we've allowed the British media to create. An environment in which when's the last time you heard the editor of the Daily Mail justifying himself, accounting for himself, explaining himself? When? It's funny, you know, talking about people who don't have a voice or people who are unaccountable in the context of politicians and unelected bureaucrats. When's the last time you saw the editor of the Sun being interviewed? Or the editor of the Mail? Yeah, obviously it's a rhetorical question. So that's why Tony Blair has to do it. I think, and I hold, you know, like a lot of people who fell for it and still believe a lot of what he did was good, I have a very complicated emotional reaction to Tony Blair. But this is an act of epic courage and principle. I say that because he is going to get absolutely crucified by over 80% of the media. And he has painted a target on his back and marched out into the middle of the Colosseum. He does not have to do this. He is doing it for one reason and one reason only. He believes Britain is about to jump into a cauldron of division and economic suffering. He believes that Britain is about to break. He believes it. Now, in the interest of our time together, and I'm going to have to park the people just for a moment who've got their fingers in their ears and are just screaming rude words like Ramona, just in terms of everybody else who can have a sensible and intelligent conversation, everybody who's got a mind that can be changed. Either way, what Tony Blair has done, he has done because he believes it to be true. You can believe something different, but you can't accuse him of anything but sincerity. And to walk into this environment, doing what he has done today, man, you couldn't do that. I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that, not with a young family. That was some of the vileness that's out there, some of the sly facilitation of the sort of sentiments that left Jo Cox bleeding and dead on the floor of her constituency. Not the kind of environment in which these posters are put up, encouraging us to treat each other like scum. And he has marched into the middle of that Colosseum with what? With a little loincloth, a shield and a dagger. And he's got lions queuing up to take chunks out of him. He has painted a target on himself in a way that, frankly, I can't quite believe until you reflect what's at stake. And what is at stake, Tony Blair believes, is the future of the United Kingdom. The very future, the existential threat to our nation that is now posed by this blind Brexit. The fact that Northern Ireland, possibly, and Scotland probably, will choose to go their own ways, leaving England absolutely enthralled to a capital city that is both economic powerhouse and desperate to remain in the European Union. It's mad, right? And Tony Blair has taken upon himself to say so. Do you know what? 25 minutes after 11, I'm just going to ask you how it's going down, I think. Hannah's in Lewisham. Hannah, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James. My God, do I agree with you or do I not agree with you? My God, I agree with you. Originally, I had a visceral dislike of Blair as a fake. Don't ask me how. Even before he was elected, I was desperate as anyone else to get Labour in. But I don't know why. It was in my stomach. I didn't like him. And he reinforced it by going ahead with Iraq, okay? Yes. But him coming on this platform, and I absolutely agree with you, I don't think there is anybody else other than him to do what he's doing right now. And I hate myself for saying this because I'd rather stick pins in my eyes than agree with Tony Blair. And the word you're looking for is that Britain is heading into the abyss. Into the abyss with this Brexit thing.
It might be a nice abyss.
No, abyss is look it up.
Well, no, an abyss is just a hole. It's a dark hole. You don't know when you get to the bottom of the abyss, it might be full of candy floss.
Well, Alice in Wonderland, it might be, and that's exactly what we're heading for, surrealism. But anyone in the way that I feel about this is that people in Britain have been sold down the Swanee. And
but now you're calling them gullible. This is the problem. It's the same problem with Trump. I know you're not intending to, but people listening to this who do not think they are gullible, stupid or racist are going to hear you describing them being sold down the Swanee, and that means you're calling them gullible.
Look, this is what I get fed up with you. You back these people up so much. They're your pals. And I was just going to make my point that, people like Boris and Gove...
They're not my pals.
Okay, but please let me finish.
Of course.
And the media people pontificating about Brexit being the right decision. What do they care about, bread going up? What do they care about Marmite going up? What do they care? They've got houses. I was listening to Pledge yesterday on Skylight, and I can't remember that blonde woman. She's very, very famous. I mean, she's got, I
have no idea what you're talking about or who you're talking about. Pledge is a furniture polish.
All right, okay. The point I'm trying to make is that there are ordinary people like me in this country. I'm from an immigrant family. I can't, at my father's death, I found his tiny little suitcase that he brought into this country with two pairs of shirts and one suit, and I thought it was so brave of him to do that. So I am fervently for movement of people, etc., okay? But the point I'm trying to make, and you keep putting me off.
I haven't spoken for 94 seconds.
It's that we've been sold down the Swanee by people like me, media people pontificating about...
Okay, no, I hear you, but I'm going to take that badge to the bank. The idea that I'm some sort of apologist and sympathiser for the more raucous Leave lobby, but that is perhaps emblematic of where we are now. I was merely, Hannah, and it's more for my own benefit than yours. As soon as I use phrases like sold down the Swanee or conned, I realise that people hear me saying you're gullible, you're stupid. I'm not saying that you're gullible or stupid, but how do you describe people who've been conned? Historically, you call them mugs. People who've been mugged are mugs. It's horrible and wrong, but again, as with Trump, the vocabulary's not there, because once a lie is given the same equivalence as either a truth or a mistake, because you have to acknowledge that sometimes people say things that aren't true by accident, but once people are saying things that aren't true deliberately for money, for clicks, for giggles, I don't know how you play this anymore, and nor does anyone else in the media or indeed the wider world. You've just got people benefiting from it and people dismayed by it. And that's the only reason I picked you up on the phrase sold down the Swanee. But again, if I hadn't said that, I wouldn't have been painted as an apologist for Boris Johnson and Michael Gove, which is quite funny. 3 numbers left on my Donald Trump roulette wheel. If you were listening in the first hour, we just put together a bunch of clips from last night's press conference and played them at random. Given the quality of my callers now, we can riff off the back of something without even knowing what it's going to be before the caller is there. And I've still got 3 of those, so I'll take some more Trump calls as well before 1 o'clock. We were going to talk about business rates. I'm just thinking, looking at the juxtaposition of Donald Trump and Tony Blair, we probably shouldn't talk about anything else between now and 1 o'clock. But I want to get back on the business rate story. And could you do me a favour? Until I'm earning enough to hire a PA, I need you to help me out a bit. I want to do more on women's pension ages. I just feel I've let you down a bit on this. That it's just because it's quite hard. We discussed it yesterday with a caller. It's quite hard to make it sexy. I don't know how to make it sexy, but just because we can't make it sexy doesn't mean we shouldn't be talking about it. And Rita, I'm thinking of you when you emailed me overnight to say that your pension age, your retirement age has already been extended by 4 years from what you thought it would be not long ago. And you now have no confidence at all that it won't get moved again. Reports last week, of course, that Brexit was going to see everybody in the country having to work longer before getting a pension because of the economic hit that we are poised to take. Perfectly entitled to think that we won't take it, but that's what the people who are paid to... people who get paid to predict these things. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. But, of course, the best example is Mark Carney. Mark Carney describing the economic troubles that we face, the only person to come forward the morning after the vote. You probably don't remember this, but it was like a warm bath when he started speaking. It was soothing, because all of the people who voted to leave, they just looked at Boris Johnson and Michael Gove standing in front of that podium, behind that podium, looking like they'd seen a ghost. Oh my God, what have we done? And the kind of fingers in the ears, hadn't started yet. It was just that. And then Carney came out and said, right, we've done it. We're going to do this, this, this and this to make sure the things that would happen if we didn't don't happen. Mark Carney gets a kicking for predicting things are going to be bad if we leave. And then he gets another kicking when he puts measures in place to make sure things aren't as bad as he said they were going to be, and the measures work. He gets another kicking. That's a brilliant illustration of how mad everything has become. Absolutely brilliant illustration. He's the perfect example of it. And another reason why no politician, no serving politician would have done what Tony Blair has done. Most of them can't afford to, in the strictest and simplest of terms. Certainly on the left in this country, most of them don't have the directorships and the chairmanships and the speechwriting gigs. 80 grand George Osborne got last week for a speech in New York. Most of them don't have that. Tony Blair is absolutely financially secure for generations to come. And sadly, that's part of the world we've created, where only rich people can run the risk of politics. Which, of course, takes us back to Donald Trump. It's 11:37. Clara is in Chelsea. Blair and Brexit. Clara, what do you think?
Oh, I could go try topical with you this morning, actually. Can we start with Trump first?
Oh, all right. Blimey.
I'm just really relieved that someone at Fox has finally seen the light and they're calling him out, because I hope now I can have a deep sigh of relief that people can actually see what's happening. And now, Tony Blair this morning, I'm so relieved somebody stood up, because I just feel like someone's heard what I've been trying to say since Brexit. Because I don't know if Brexit is good or bad. I don't know. But I'm just saying, let's just slow down a bit and let's,
Well, let's have a better idea of whether it's good or bad before we actually make the final leap.
But everybody's sort of going, no, we mustn't do that. And I think you've just hit the nail on the head. We needed Blair to be the one, because he's got nothing to lose, whereas all the other people who could be conviction politicians, but we don't know because they weren't allowed to stand up for their own beliefs.
And even less so now. They have to pretend they were in favour. That's the weirdest thing about the Downing Street double act, is they're pretending that they were up for this all along.
Oh, and James, trust me, that worries me more than anything. We've got someone who stood up in, was it Goldman Sachs, and said it was such a bad idea, but now she's standing at the front of the ship going, no, this is a great idea, leading us over. Oh, goodness me. And I just feel like I've been standing against the glass banging and no one can hear me. That is the only way I've felt. And every time I try to talk to my children and explain, make sure they're informed, don't get angry, get informed. And
sounds familiar.
I found it, my husband and I have been arguing about it. It's been, and I'm just standing here, and today I just feel like today I'm heard. So,
you might not have chosen this particular messenger, but you'll take whatever messenger you can get to have this message getting out there.
I think he was the only one who could.
I think you're probably right.
I think what will happen now is you're going to have everyone banging on for the weekend about Iraq.
No, hang on a minute. I've made a little list of things I haven't seen yet, but I'm expecting to any minute now. He wants to be president of the European Union. Is that out there yet? Have you seen that yet?
Is that news or fake news?
Well, it's just something that people have to make up immediately in order to put themselves in a position where they can discredit what he's saying, because they can't accept that he's saying it because he means it. They have to come up with a reason why. So I will give you, he wants to be king of the president of the EU. He wants to be, the Bilderberg group have made him do it. That'll be incoming any minute now. It's because his wife's an immigrant. She's not, but hey, who cares these days? Hashtag fake news. And
she's not Jewish or black, so we have to go with that.
And he's getting paid. He's getting paid a secret fortune to do this by. Come on. Rothschilds.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know, but I'm just so relieved.
Do you want to spin my Trump roulette wheel before you go, Clara?
No,
yeah, of course you can. Go on.
I'd love to. Thank you.
There we go.
Well, I had nothing to do with it. I have nothing to do with Russia. I told you. I have no deals there. I have no anything. Now, when WikiLeaks, which I had nothing to do with, comes out and happens to give, they're not giving classified information. They're giving stuff, what was said in an office about Hillary cheating on the debates.
WikiLeaks doesn't publish classified information, which kind of makes you wonder why Bradley Manning's in jail. Stephen is in Inverness. Stephen, what would you like to say? Chelsea Manning, I beg your pardon. Stephen, what's on your mind?
I've got a friend in the US who I speak to on Facebook quite regularly, and before the election, he was completely anti-Trump. Now, he believes everything Trump says, it seems.
So he's gone the other way. He's sort of swallowed the Kool-Aid.
I have regular debates with him, and it doesn't matter what I say, When the travel ban came out, it was all Obama's idea originally. He's just doing what Obama would have done. And, it really is.
What's he getting? What does he... Because if he was opposed to Trump in the first place, he shouldn't have wanted a Muslim ban.
Well,
so what does he get out of it? What's the transaction here?
Well, because Trump says it's in the idea of national security, he believes this. He says that, national security is so important and top of the agenda. It seems that whatever Trump says, he'll believe. And it's quite...
But what changed? What changed from the bit where you said he didn't believe anything to start with? He was anti-Trump. What's changed for him? What would you describe as the kind of the pendulum swing?
I think, I don't know, I think it's kind of this...
No, it's all right, mate. You ask him next time you're on Facebook together, and we'll try and find out, because that seems to me to be the fulcrum in this story that you're telling. The idea that something happened to make somebody who was troubled by sort of racist, misogynistic rhetoric, who suddenly is persuaded by it. It's a remarkable psychological journey to have undertaken. Have we had the European? I've got it. Someone's just tweeted it to me. Blair's incentive for this is that he wants to be European president. This isn't about the UK. It's about his own ego. Ladies and gentlemen, there you go. It's there. It's already there. Anyone mention Bilderberg or the Rothschilds yet? That'll be incoming. It's impossible, if you see everything through a lens of division and bitterness, to imagine that anybody anywhere can ever act simply on principle. What's in this for Tony Blair is immediately the question that the hecklers will reach for. Why is he doing this? He can't just mean it. It can't just be true in his view. Why is he doing this? And they're coming up with self-serving reasons. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need if you want to join in on this. I'll take some more calls on Trump. I've got a couple of phone lines free. Be quick, though. The Trump question was really how you move past the big but, how you move past the... look, all of these things are demonstrably true. All of these clips that we've played display him as lying, display him as playing fast and loose with the truth, and yet when he accuses the media of doing all the things he does, it plays well with the core audience. I find that fascinating, and we haven't got to the bottom of the big but, although one American caller suggested that it has a lot to do with the validation of, quotes, values, end quotes, that have been rendered very unfashionable lately. So you have the pro-choice people who are so relieved that they're finally going to be able to tell women that they can't make decisions about their own bodies anymore. You have the sort of Christian evangelical / homophobic lobby who are delighted that they're not going to be made to feel embarrassed for speaking up against homosexuality, for not letting adults make their own decisions about their own sex lives anymore. You all of this, and then you possibly add in the race element and of course the Islamophobic element as well, and you may get a bit of an answer. But I think people like me struggle to understand how that can be such a massive weight on one end of the seesaw that it completely dwarfs the weight of all the evidence, the fact-based evidence at the other end of the seesaw. And some elements of that analysis apply to Blair as well. So how do you feel about him wading back into the debate? Mark's in Fakenham. Mark, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Yeah, I'm struck this morning. I should say, first of all, I voted to remain. I'm a Labour Party member, and I wish very much to like Jeremy Corbyn.
It's a heck of a lot of Leave posters on that road from Kings Lynn to Fakenham, Mark. As you make your way through East Rudham, there was a whopping great one by the egg shop, wasn't there?
Yeah, I've seen a few of those, unfortunately, around here. But what I'm struck by this morning, and I haven't listened to Tony Blair's speech in full, just what's been reported on LBC this morning while I've been driving, but I'm struck by there was a conversation a couple of days ago, that you had about what should opposition look like.
Yes.
And I keep thinking, this is it? This is what opposition should look like?
But Tony Blair doesn't have a seat to defend at the next general election, and I know I'm like a stuck record on this, but you cannot underestimate the role that the media now, the newspapers in particular, now play. If you were fighting a seat in the next election and you had stood up to Brexit, the Daily Mail will have your guts for garters. You've seen what they do. These are sort of echoes of some of the darkest periods of human history. Enemies of the people, making lists, but effectively painting targets on people's faces despite what's happened to... Well, I don't need to mention any names, and that's why they can't do it. I don't know about Corbyn's rationale. I think he's closer to not wanting to leave anyway, but for the rest of them, the ones that kind of know Tony Blair's right but haven't provided a platform themselves, they're frightened of their own futures.
Absolutely, I don't disagree with that. It's just I'm more sort of just like you, just pointing out what a shame it is, really, that it takes a situation where arguably the least popular man, and like you, I have a very complex feeling about Tony Blair. You know,
Yes, because you feel let down by him.
I'm finding this quite a lot at the moment. I'm also, I find myself agreeing with Nick Clegg quite a lot at the moment, and I think, God, it's such a shame he made such terrible mistakes. He's making a lot of sense now, and I wish I could like him wholeheartedly.
Well, I wonder again, and I've already apologised for being a stuck record, but how much of our attitude to some of these non-right-wing politicians has been subconsciously coloured by newspaper coverage?
Oh, entirely it is. Entirely it
is.
Maybe
Ed Miliband would have been a good Prime Minister, and his ability to eat a bacon sandwich in a handsome fashion possibly shouldn't have been such a major factor in our judgment of him.
No, perhaps not. It's just such a shame that we have an opposition at the moment. And like I say, I want nothing more than for Jeremy Corbyn to succeed. But and for the reasons you rightly point out, that can't stand up. You've got Labour MPs how many Labour MPs represent seats that voted to remain? And none of them are saying this. And
they've all had to go through on the vote for Article 50, and I understand why, because the democratic process demands that they respect the result of the referendum. It also demands that they end up going through the lobby, voting deliberately against what they consider to be the best interest of their constituents. And when all the dust has settled, if you have to come up with a little scenario, a vignette that sums up the madness of this whole process, whichever side of the fence you sit on, the idea that we have somehow reclaimed parliamentary sovereignty by forcing elected representatives to vote in a way that they believe will harm their constituents, that's incredible. But that's 2016. I am talking to you about Donald Trump and Tony Blair, which I'm not going to get tired of pointing out. If I'd suggested to you a couple of years ago that we'd be discussing the most important political moments of our era, and the two key players today were Donald Trump and Tony Blair, you'd be more likely to see both of them on Dancing on Ice probably a couple of years ago than at the centre of these stories. Tony Blair has waded into the Brexit debate. I suggest to you, because somebody had to, regardless of what transpires and what ends up, the idea that we're doing this thing without anybody formally representing the fear that we're making a mistake. That's all you need to call it, whatever side you voted on. Just the fear that this isn't quite what anybody expected to happen next, and the very real possibility that we'll come away with no deal at all. We will just be cut loose, because Theresa May knows, especially if she has to present it to Parliament, she knows that the backseat drivers and the hecklers are still in charge. The editors of the Daily Mail and the Sun, or the owner of the Sun, I think the editor does what he's told. But some of these columnists, they're still, because they have so much invested now, because they didn't think they were going to win. So they threw all the rubbish at you and all the lies and all the exaggerations and all the nonsense. So they didn't think they were going to win, so it didn't matter. Now that they've won, they've got two choices. Either they turn around and say, shucks, sorry, dude. Obviously, when I thought we were going to lose, I was playing fast and loose with the truth. Or they're going to double down. And do these men look to you like the kind of people who are going to publicly admit a mistake? In some cases, you're talking about men who lie about assassination attempts upon themselves in newspapers that will be read by their own school friends' classmates, their own daughter's classmate. Can you imagine the psychology that's needed to lie about an assassination in the knowledge that your own children will be asked about it at school? You think someone like that is going to turn around and say, sorry, come on, let's be fair. If I can lie about an assassination attempt, European Union membership's hardly very important, but yeah, I lied about both. It's not going to happen. Boris Johnson still has political ambitions. He can't demolish those. And it may well turn out that they weren't wrong about some of it, but who on earth is representing the people who are fearful that they were? Answer, Lord above, Tony Blair. Where should we go next? Trump or Blair? Let's go to Stephanie, who's in Chiswick. Stephanie, Trump or Blair?
Trump.
What do you want to say?
That I think what Trump's doing now, I don't actually think that the situation is unique at all. I think what he's doing is he's tapping into human ego and he's tapping into money. And he's running the country like oftentimes companies run businesses. And it's communication styles, actually, that we see and sometimes applaud a lot in the corporate world. I think we see it, so whether it's...
But he's lost 3 key appointees already, one after getting the nod, 2 before. I mean, if he was running a business and his director of finance and his head of personnel had to either resign in disgrace or withdraw their nomination because either they didn't want to work with him or their reputation was being examined in such a humiliating fashion that they couldn't turn up for a vote at Congress because they knew they'd be rejected, that is... I mean, look, if he was a contestant on The Apprentice, he'd have fired himself.
But I don't think it's that different, James. I think if we look at, so let's take, for example, Volkswagen with emissions issues, or let's take Sainsbury's or Tesco's with pricing issues. It's the same type of thing where, on the one hand, there's usually a few of the executives that they're let go or asked to resign or what have you. But at the same time, internally, there's that battle cry of, we're number one.
But here's the thing. Where are all the people, especially the people that bought the cars, who think that what Volkswagen did was brilliant? Where are they, Stephanie? For your analogy to really work, you'd have to find those people, and I don't think they exist.
But they're still buying cars.
Well, that's not the point. They're not cheering Volkswagen for lying to them. Yay, more lies, please.
But the employees are still there, and the employees are saying, yay. Partially it's because it's their paycheck. It's what feeds their families. And partially because people just fundamentally want to be part of and applauding. If they're that deep in, they're just going to go for some more.
If they're that deep in, I mean, that brings us back to Brexit. If they're that deep in, they can't even contemplate a reversal, which is perhaps why Tony Blair has come back to the British political stage today. Thank you, Stephanie. 11:56 is the time. Oh, hang on. How many balls have we got left, Axel? We've only got one more, Stephanie. Do you want to roll the roulette wheel?
I sure do. Let's go.
Let's go.
I guess it was the biggest electoral college win since Ronald Reagan. Okay, go ahead.
Mr. President, excuse me. You said, I am, just want to go on the table. Very simply, you said today that you have the biggest electoral margin since Ronald Reagan with 304 or 306 electoral votes. In fact, President Obama got 365 and 2.
I'm talking about Republican.
President Obama 332 and George H.W. Bush 426. When he won as president. So why should Americans trust him?
I was given that information. I don't know. I was just given. We had a very, very big margin.
I guess my question is, why should Americans trust you when you accuse the information they receive of being fake when you're providing information that's...
Well, I don't know. I was given that information. I've seen that information around. But it was a very substantial victory. Do you agree with that?
That's my favourite.
Okay, thank you.
That's my favourite, actually. I can't believe we saved the best till last. It's like roast potatoes at Sunday lunch. That's it, Stephanie, isn't it? I mean, Mr. President, here is incontrovertible proof that you're lying through your teeth. Oh, well, I was given that information. And you're right, I guess. Some punters don't, well, most punters who love him don't care.
They don't. Look at the space shuttle and the O-rings. You know, that goes back a couple of decades.
You lost me there. Go on.
Bought into, I don't want to be the one who's causing trouble.
I don't want to be the one who's causing trouble. I don't want to be the one who's mixing it up. I mean, actually, I'll come to Joel first after the news. I want to hear that one again. Axel, please.
I guess it was the biggest electoral college win since Ronald Reagan. Okay, go ahead.
Mr. President, excuse me. You said, I am, just want to go on the table. Very simply, you said today that you have the biggest electoral margin since Ronald Reagan with 304 or 306 electoral votes. In fact, President Obama got 365 and 2.
I'm talking about Republican.
President Obama 332 and George H.W. Bush 426 when he won as president. So why should Americans trust him?
I was given that information. I don't know. I was just given. We had a very, very big margin.
I guess my question is, why should Americans trust you when you accuse the information they receive of being fake when you're providing information that's...
Well, I don't know. I was given that information. I've seen that information around. But it was a very substantial victory. Do you agree with that?
You're the president.
You're the president. You're the president. And there it is. You just don't get it, do you? You still don't get it. They still don't get it. You're right. I don't, and I never will. I do not understand how you can get lied to by someone and then cheer them, shake them by the hand, and give them all your money. I suppose I do understand it. It happens all the time with kind of email scams and transit vans pulling up at the curb telling you they've got some speakers in the back that are left over from a job they've just done and you can have them for a knockdown price. Or the bloke with a hold-all that says he's got an Apple Mac in it and somehow after you've given him 200 quid and he's given you the hold-all, it's been swapped for bricks. Happens all the time. But why wouldn't you be cross? Still baffled, still don't get it. This is clever. I think it is. I'll be honest with you, it might not be, but it looks clever, and it's got me persuaded. Chris has tweeted at Mr. James O.B. to say the lying is intended to get a reaction from opponents. When they react, it's proof of the endemic political protectionism he opposes. You'd think it's probably a little bit overly sophisticated for an analysis of Donald Trump, but it's not just Donald Trump, remember, who are behind this project. Say an outrageous lie, squealing liberals get their knickers in an almighty twist, and it's yet more evidence that squealing liberals are always getting their knickers in an almighty twist. I think that's what you mean, isn't it, Chris? Or, I mean, saying an outrageous lie, and even if your own side, as is now beginning to happen with Republican congressmen and women and Fox News presenters putting the boot in to the fan of Putin. I can't even resist the rhyme there. It's pathetic. When they're joining in, you begin to wonder whether this notion of the establishment, he's going to start portraying his own opponents within his own party as the enemy, part of the establishment, that he is a... Oh, man, it's so interesting. And speaking of the establishment, Tony's back. 0345 606 0973. He wants to stop Brexit. Do you think he's got a prayer? Let's do the final hour of the week together on that. I know lately I've been finding something funny for 12 o'clock on Fridays just to ease us into the weekend, but, well, the only other contender today was business rates, and that's not a laugh a minute in anybody's book, is it? So do you think Tony Blair's got a hope in hell of pulling this off? That's all. Keep it friendly, keep it warm, but come at it from whatever angle you want. I'm not sure he does. I'm really not sure he does. It seems to me that the landscape is so toxic, so vicious for years now. The way they talk about those of us who are unpersuaded by men like Ian Duncan Smith, the way they talk about us is just vile. It's so rude and unnecessary. But I get it. I mean, you know, I'm a snowflake. I understand why you're doing that. I would be probably doing something similar if I was facing up to the possibility that I had made such an epic error. It'd be a hell of a lot easier to call the people pointing it out idiots and Ramonas than it would be to own up. And besides, I've got nothing to lose yet. Joel's in Hendon. Joel, Tony Blair, has he got a chance?
Not a chance.
Go on.
Here's the thing, James.
Yes.
The thing is, I don't think he's got a hidden agenda.
No, nor do I. Of course not.
He truly means this, and he's probably right. But no one's going to go with him. A, because it's too little too late, and B, because it's Tony Blair. He's the wrong person for the message.
There's no one else, though. There's no one else. I don't dispute that he's not perfect, but who else could have done this?
I think it's too little too late. I don't think anyone else could have done it.
See, someone from the realms of arts did it. It would be lovely. You know, you see how they've closed down everybody. Absolutely nobody is allowed to have a dissenting view. If you're a successful, journalist, you're a Ramona. If you're a successful artist, you're a Lovey. If you're a successful writer, you're a liberal pantwetter. Nobody is allowed to have a dissenting view. Tony Blair is the only one with shoulders broad enough and skin thick enough to have at least tried to do this.
The trouble with your analysis is I think it works both ways. This is the world we're in at the moment. This isn't a left-wing, right-wing thing, things like that. Both sides will use the argument. They will always find something to whip somebody with. So, I think actually well done for bringing up the Rothschild thing before. You know, we all know that, or certainly there's certain people...
I was joking.
I know you were joking, but...
Oh, no. Don't. No, there's no but.
Comes from the right and comes from the left.
All right.
And if someone can use an argument, they will use it. That's my point.
Okay, yes.
And this...
Oh, they will. I mean, he wants to be Prime Minister again. Just incoming. We should have a little alarm for these. Incoming, he wants to be Prime Minister again. And genuinely, now half a dozen that have been forwarded to me by others, so I haven't found them on my own feed, he wants to be President of the European Union. That's the only reason he's doing this.
It's rubbish. I mean, it's rubbish. But as I say, it's both sides. It's not because this isn't the Brexiters, will only use these arguments. The other side will use that argument as well. Look at the extreme left of the Labour Party. They're also used to the arguments as well.
The extreme left, yes, but not the centre left.
I don't know. I think if it suits them, and if a news item suits them, and then get the right people on board, they will use it. I don't think anyone's whiter than white.
No one's whiter than white, but centrism usually means the opposite of extreme, and it's at the extremities that you find the behaviour you describe. But what I think Tony Blair has pinpointed today, and not everyone will agree with me on this, but he's pinpointed the fact that somehow we've ended up with the extremity leading the centre on something as important as leaving the European Union.
Except if you take our current Prime Minister, everyone says, she voted against it. I think in her heart of hearts, she actually was all for it. She was certainly against
I think Corbyn was. I think she emotionally, so yes, in her heart of hearts, maybe she liked the idea of leaving, but she's a pragmatist. And she knew, as she said, without knowing that it would ever be made public, as she said to the Goldman Sachs meeting, it would be absolutely disastrous, and that I think is why Blair has to step in. But I'm with Joel on this. I'm not exactly overcome with optimism. 12:08 is the time. Are you? 0345 606 0973. And this place obviously has become something of a locus, a focal point for people I'm going to use the phrase safe space because it's been very much maligned. I think we've created a safe space here for people to say, yeah, actually, I did make a mistake. And no one's going to scream at them or call them names or shout at them. But equally, you know, whether or not there's enough people in that constituency to justify Tony Blair's belief that we should rise up and go out to change even more minds, I don't know. Kevin's in Manchester. Kevin, what would you like to say?
It's just that I agree with Blair. Going forward, the Remain people to stand up and to say, listen, we've made a mistake by, when I say we, I mean the country,
yes,
going out. And here's the consequence. What I think we're falling short of on the argument is never going to change the Brexit people. An example of it, you heard the saying early doors.
Yes, I have.
Yeah, right. I still go through that scenario, being in a nice position of being retired. We see the workers coming in the early doors, and we also see the lads who, unfortunately, disabled and not working. Yeah,
right.
So we have the United Nations in the vault discussing everything. It doesn't matter what we say about Brexit, and the same in America. It's never going to be believed. An example: the wages have gone down in the EU because of immigrants over here. Yeah. But in Germany, they have more immigration and the wages has gone up. There's one point. The second point is they're taking all our jobs. Do you go in the local supermarket? Yes. Well, I go in and there's 20 checkouts that are no longer there. We have to do our own. There's no immigration.
And also they're boasting about employment levels being really, really high. And the same people are saying, there you go, this is proof that Brexit isn't a bad idea. Look how many people have got jobs in this country. Ignore the fact that a lot of the jobs are inadequate and that most of them now are filled by people who have recently arrived here. Most of the new jobs that are announced as proof that Brexit's a good idea.
So back to Blair, I was very up. I'm a Labour supporter, and I jumped for joy when Blair became Prime Minister. For two reasons. One, he became Prime Minister and Labour was in government, but secondly, it was the day I retired, which was absolutely brilliant for me. Anyway, the story being that facts will not get in the way
of feelings.
Exactly.
Why not, Kevin?
Well, in this particular, the United Nations in the vault,
I don't know what you mean by that. I don't know whether it's a figure of speech. What do you mean the United Nations in the vault?
Well, you know, as a forum, we've got workers, we've got people who have retired, and we've got people who are on benefits.
Who has? Where are you?
I'm in the vault in the pub. Doors.
Well, how do I know you were in the pub, Kevin? For heaven's sake, mate, I'm sitting here thinking you're speaking in code. You're sitting in the pub with a bunch of mates.
On early doors.
Early doors? I know what it means. I didn't mean you meant that you were there at 11 o'clock this morning ordering your pint of Boddingtons, Kevin.
No, that's not early doors. Early doors is 5:30 when the workers get...
Got ya. So, right, I've only ever seen that down at Smithfield. So what are you doing in the pub at 5:30? Oh, you mean at the end of the day?
Yeah.
Right, now I have my crash course in Mancunian slang. We can carry on with the conversation, Kevin.
Have you ever seen the early doors on the cellar?
Let's park that now. I know what you're talking about. So there you are, in the vault with the United Nations, culled from right across the gamut of the British experience.
So no matter how, whatever example you give to them will not get across at the end of the day.
Oh, welcome to my world.
Right. So Trump is right in the sense that, say what you want, I'll get round it. The Brexit people done exactly the same to us, even though they remain. The point being is, where do we get round it for people? I don't think Corbyn, I don't think Blair will do it. He gave a great example today, didn't he, of the House scenario?
Yes, I thought that was strong.
Well, why doesn't the MPs who would stand up and give the people them examples?
Because they're terrified. I mean, just imagine what it's like. Even when an MP who was...
You know what I mean, James? It's like saying, look, it's going to be bad when we come out. We've got to look after workers' rights. No, let's say, this is what's going to happen. And I can prove it. Here it is. That will get round it, but we don't. We just seem to fly over it. And, you know, I mean, Jeremy Corbyn, he's a nice person, but he believes everyone believes that what he's saying is correct. And he's a nice... and it's logical, and that's no good. I'll give an example of what I mean by that, of what Blair and My old fella, being very cynical, said to me, we was talking about Blair just before he retired, and he said, this was coming up to the election, he said, what do you think? And I said, well, he's got a great team behind him. He's a young, current MP. Brilliant. He said, well, I'm not sure. He said, I'll tell you one thing that's going for him. He's a better liar than the Tories.
I like it. Well, crikey. Yeah, you can hear my laugh was genuine, and then I got hit round the back of the head by the subtext, of course, and he was more plausible than the Tories, wasn't he? That was what made it.
Now, James, it's not about what he's saying about Brexit and Remain. It's about him. There's the story that's going to be what. It's all, like you say.
And he knows that. He knows that his appeal is limited. You know, the proof of that, Kevin, is the low profile that he took during the Remain campaign. He obviously accepted and understood that he would potentially do more harm than good because of his personal reputation, which is why I'm impressed by what he's done now. He's put country before himself.
What I would have liked to see earlier, before the vote, was that they came out and shown us them facts. Really.
They tried, mate, but they tried, Kevin, but it was all Project Fear, wasn't it?
Well, it was fear.
That's what they called it. Every time someone came out, well, and by the way, we won't be able to do this and we won't be able to do that. Do you know who told us that we'd have to leave the single market? David Cameron and George Osborne. They're the ones that said we won't be able to stay in the single market. And then all the people on the other side said, yes, we will. We'll get a Norway-style deal, or we'll do this, or we'll do that. Yeah. And then, after it became clear that we would have to leave the single market, the same people that told the lies turned around and said, no, you knew we'd have to leave because those people over there that we called liars punting Project Fear, they told you that we'd have to leave. So you can't claim now that it's come as a surprise. And these are the moments.
So the people that voted to come out on the assumption of, say, immigration.
Yeah.
Well, I would like Corbyn or someone to come on and say to these people on the television interview and say, well, okay, let's give you a scenario. Let's say that Mrs. May comes back and says, I'm sorry, we've got nothing.
I like the impression there. That sigh. It was almost like she was in the room, Kevin.
Well, I pulled my face as well, James, but obviously you couldn't see it.
We got nothing. And that is probably what's going to happen, and we're going to have to go, oh, good, well done.
No, but if someone would have said...
Got to go to the travel. Go on.
I'm sorry, yeah. Here's the end story. We've got nothing. We can't do this unless we do this and that. And they have not budged one iota.
No, why would they?
What I'm saying, and she's come back.
A lot of love for you out here, Kevin. Kevin is fab. What a caller. Ring me again, all right? Promise?
Cheers.
All right, carry on. 12:17. Again with you, thinking about what Kevin just said then. And it's something that if you're kind enough to listen to this programme on a regular basis, you'll be very, very familiar with. It's really the question of our age. Why don't facts trump feelings more? And there's a lovely answer here. This is a research paper that's been published last month by two authors, one from the University of Strathclyde and one from the Centre for European Economic Research. It's entitled Jobs, Crime and Votes, a short-run evaluation of the refugee crisis in Germany. It just occurred to me that when Kevin pointed out Germany's taken in loads of refugees and migrants and not fallen for the line that it's driving down everybody's wages or anything like that. Just listen to this, and I will show you, I think, why Kevin and I fail when we use our facts to trump the feelings of people who believe the opposite. Millions of refugees, this is the abstract, the kind of précis of what the research paper shows. I'll tweet it so that you can have a look at the whole thing. Millions of refugees made their way to Europe between 2014 and 2015, with over 1 million arriving in Germany alone. Yet little is known about the impact of this inflow on labour markets, crime and voting behaviour. This article uses administrative data on refugee allocation and provides an evaluation of the short-run consequences of the refugee inflow. Our identification strategy exploits that a scramble for accommodation determined the assignment of refugees to German counties, resulting in exogenous variations in the number of refugees per county within and across states. Our estimates suggest that migrants have not displaced native workers but have themselves struggled to find gainful employment. We find very small increases in crime, in particular with respect to drug offences and fare dodging. Our analysis further suggests that counties which experience a larger influx see neither more nor less support for the main anti-immigrant party than counties which experience small migrant inflows. Right? The reason why these facts don't cut through is simple. They're all rapists, they're going to kill you, and once you're dead, they're going to rape your children. Right, who are you going to listen to? Where are we? Let's get back to the cool analysis. Our identification strategy exploits that a scramble for accommodation determined the assignment of refugees to German counties, resulting in exogenous variations in the refugees. Excuse me, resulting in exogenous variations in the number of refugees per county. I want my country back. Oh, sorry. Our estimates suggest that migrants have not displaced native workers, but have themselves struggled to fight. You can't see a doctor anymore. That's the battle. It's like in one corner you've got Optimus Prime, and in the other corner you've got Mr. Logic out of Viz. Go on then, while we're at it. Our analysis further suggests that counties which experience a larger influx see neither more nor less support for the main anti-immigrant part. They're ruining our life. They want Sharia law. You can't. How are you ever going to have a fair fight between someone screaming hate on one corner and someone doing quite dry, cold analysis with facts and research and actual visits to the areas that you're talking about in the other corner? That's why I don't think Tony Blair's going to pull it off. We've gone too far down the rabbit hole. Sue's in Wimbledon. Sue, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello, Sue.
I love your show.
You're very kind.
You. What I wanted to say was that there has been someone speaking out against Brexit from day one, and that's Nick Clegg. Okay, he might not get the sensational.
But he's a busted flush even more than Blair is because of the coalition and tuition fees and
Absolutely, and this is what my point is, that everyone that's speaking up against it, they are all discredited in some way. Nick Clegg is discredited because of the coalition government, the tuition fees. Blair, Iraq. Anyone that stands up against, and speaks out against it, they either are discredited already or they will become discredited. They will be attacked. And you're right. That's why no one's doing it. Tim Farron is doing it, but no one listens to him. Hey, who's he? He's a small party.
You're
exactly.
so mean. Yes, but you're right.
Well, I mean,
if he was making more of an impact, he'd be getting. If he was making more of an impact, he'd be getting more of a kicking.
Well, look, the thing is, the people that are speaking out against, people aren't listening if they're not listening because they go, oh, that's Tony Blair, Iraq, or that's Nick Clegg. We don't believe anything he says.
Or enemies of the people if it's a judge.
Absolutely. The right-wing media are on a mission to discredit anybody who is going to come up against them. And this is why, you are absolutely right, this is why MPs are not speaking out, because they know they will be crucified. Blair has nothing to lose. Clegg has nothing to lose. And that's why they're doing it.
And do you know what? It's not even party. Look what they've done to John Bercow in the last couple of weeks. Look the way they've been talking about him. It's quite incredible.
I have a slight problem with that because I think he should have spoken out against the Chinese. But look, he's done it now.
Yes, of course.
And what are we doing? You're right. We're let's get him out. Pitchforks. This is what's happening in this country, and it's a disgraceful shame. And I'm ashamed of what is happening. I believe that MPs should have voted with their constituents against triggering Article 50. Who is speaking for the 48%? Who is speaking for us? Who has any power?
Tony Blair.
Yes, but what can Blair do? We need sitting MPs. We need people that can make a difference to speak up. Why won't they? I don't.
Well, you do. You've explained why. You know why. That's
why. That's why. So this is the country that we're living in now. This is the future that our children.
Right. Here's the thing.
If you believe in something, you just keep your mouth shut because you might.
Shut up and move on. Get over it. You lost. That is the country that we're bringing our children up in. Also, where liars get rewarded and cheats win. But here's the thing. How do you? Because you sound a lot nicer than me. How do you persuade someone? And I don't mean the determined to be disgusted people. I don't mean the people who look upon this as, the kind of people who were walking around the morning after the vote with their Get Them Out Now T-shirts. I don't mean them, although there's a hell of a lot more of them than any of us ever realised during the halcyon good old days of political correctness. But the ones who aren't like that, the people that you could describe as decent but discomforted, decent but disconcerted, decent but discombobulated, how do you do what Tony Blair wants you to do, Sue, and persuade them of their error without insulting them or similar?
I'll tell you how. You've become the voice of reason. What's happening is a lot of these people that voted for Brexit, and you're right, a lot of good people who voted with good intentions, okay?
Yes, of course.
They were they were misled, they were lied to.
But now you've just called them gullible. You've just called them gullible.
Well, I'm not saying they're gullible.
Well, you
I'm
are.
saying they needed to hear something and somebody gave it to them. Yeah? Somebody gave it to them. The thing is, they might change their mind, but they're not going to say it, are they? Because at the end of the day, it's like they're not going to say Ramona's they're not going to say I made a mistake. Actually,
some of them are, but you're right.
Well,
and the louder the voice, the less likely it is. That's and yet, do you know what we should do? We may do this next week. I'd love to hear from the people in that category that we've just described, decent but still disconcerted, what they think the motivation is of so-called Ramonas. Because either you believe people when they say, I honestly think we're going to hurt ourselves, and the less you've got, the more hurt you're going to get. Or there's some other subtext here. What is it? Because you see the silly stuff like, oh, you're just worried you won't be able to have a Polish nanny anymore. And you sort of think, or you used to think, oh, don't be daft. You don't really mean that. But given what's happened in the last 6 months, I no longer take daftness as evidence that someone doesn't really believe it. But
it's very similar to the Trump issue. I think basically the way the world is moving, globalization, etc., people have been left behind. There's no question about that. And we have to face up to that. We can't just pretend that these people don't have these issues and that they have voted the way they voted because, you had a caller on earlier who...
I'll go to the news. Sue, I've got you filled your boots, but I can allow you no longer, I'm afraid. Many thanks indeed. It's 12:30. Can I have a go at the roulette wheel? Everyone else, I let callers have all the goes. It was supposed to be my game. We've got clips from Donald Trump's press conference last night, and we spent an hour this morning having quite a lot of fun just randomly choosing them. But I gave the control of the wheel to everybody else. Can I have a go? Can we just roll it once, please?
We had Hillary Clinton give Russia 20% of the uranium in our country. You know what uranium is, right? It's a thing called nuclear weapons and other things. Of things are done with uranium, including some bad things.
What bad things? Crikey. He's good, actually. I'm reviewing my opinion. Go on, roll. Can I have one more roll and then we'll get back to the calls? Come on, it's my show. Go on, roll the dice. The
leaks are real. You're the one that wrote about them and reported them. Remember, the leaks are real. You know what they said. You saw it.
Yeah, I read it.
And the leaks are absolutely real. The news is fake because so much of the news is fake.
But the news about the real leaks is fake? How can the news about the leaks be fake if the leaks are real? Strange times. Gareth's in Liverpool. Gareth, what have you got?
Hello, sir.
Blair or Trump?
I've lost all train of thought, if I'm honest, because...
That's all right, mate. So I do this for a living. Not everybody does. Marcus is in Swiss Cottage. Marcus, what would you like to say?
Hi.
Come back to Gareth when he's got his train of thought back. Marcus, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello, mate.
What I wanted to say was I'm glad that Blair, a global politician figure, has taken the flag of the Remain cause. He's put his head above the parapet more than he did during the campaign.
Yeah.
I'm hoping now he can. I know he's not the ideal candidate, but I'm hoping that it can be the start of something good, where he kind of tries to bring together those 16 million people, and hopefully resonates with us to try and reinvigorate those who feel despondent at the time, because, the Remainers are in the losing camp on paper, I should add. But then why are we expected to sort of pack up our bags, our principles along with it, and just say, come on now, it's over. Now you have to toe the line of the 17 million. Why should we go sort of, as they say, quietly, gently, and peacefully into the night?
Well, we would do if there was just something to demonstrate that it isn't a mistake, or at best a blind hope, a blind ambition. I wonder whether the answer is actually this. It's just come in while you were talking. That I think you're over. I've lost it. Here we go. I think you're over-analysing this, says Matt. I suspect you're over-analysing the Brextremist mindset. I won't use that word again because I don't like the name calling, but people won't admit to being wrong as they don't want to lose face. That's the challenge that Tony Blair has launched today, and I don't know how he's going to achieve it. Do you?
I don't know. I think that all I can say is that history furnishes sort of great examples where defeated causes, nations, and people have come back twice as strong as before. Because of their defeat. sometimes, it's not always the greatest of causes. You could say, look, the Germans got licked in World War I, but by God, did they come back twice as strong in World War II? I'm not sort of drawing a parallel morally, but I'm just saying that because you take a licking, you don't have to.
What doesn't kill us take us stronger. You haven't got a periodic table to hand, have you, Marcus?
No, don't carry it with me in my pocket.
Well, so I might make it a prerequisite for callers to this program. I'm going to apologise to President Trump. I've just got hold of a periodic table and I've looked up uranium, and it does actually say under the general properties of uranium, it's this thing called nuclear weapons, and other things, like lots of things, are done with uranium, including some bad things.
Indeed. Well, it's he sounds quite juvenile when he...
What do you do? I mean, this was the first hour, and in a way, I feel Brexit is the same, although I appreciate some people who vote. I mean, my friends who voted to leave the European Union are particularly appalled at the suggestion that they're part of some pro-Trump mindset. But an awful lot of people have drawn the parallels. And again, how can you feel anything but abject terror? Or, if you're in the right mood, gigglesome, Marcus and I, the idea of a man in possession of the nuclear codes describing the radioactive metallic element uranium as this thing called nuclear weapons, and other things, like lots of things, are done with uranium, including some bad things. And you're right when you tell me I just don't get it, because I don't know that there is anything to get there. You just don't get it, do you, James? You just don't get it. You still don't get it. What I don't get is how anybody could hear a man in possession of the nuclear codes describing nuclear weaponry in a way that makes my 8-year-old laugh. That's what I don't get. Billy's in North London. Billy, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. I'm going back to the point of trying to sort of convince the Leave voters to vote Remain.
Yes.
I think I voted Leave, I won't lie. I had Nigel Farage and the rest of them pour the wall over my eyes, and I believe the lies. But now I thought such a point, with all my friends voted Remain, and I thought such a point for Leave, that now it's too embarrassing to say. It's almost embarrassing to go back and say, you know what, I'm an idiot. And I think that's
You're not an idiot. You're not an idiot. That's the first way to make it easier, I suppose. A very good friend of mine, I'm still not allowed to tell his mum that he voted Leave. He told me the day after. He told me the day after he did it that he regretted it, and he just thought it would be fun, and it'd be nice to sort of send a message, or if it was close, it would maybe make them wake up a bit. And the day after, he said, "Don't tell my mum what I've done." And but you're not an idiot. That's the problem. So what words do we use? How do we make somebody like you feel, well, this is Tony Blair's challenge, feel welcome and validated and yet at the same time wrong?
No. It's like my dad voted Leave, and he also says, like, I wish I voted Remain. The way he puts it is, when you just watch these TV programmes about these old people that have been conned out of loads of money, and you think, how have they fallen for that? How has that happened? And that's how I feel. I feel like how have I listened to this and believed it, and now I've come away, and I just think, like, what have I done? Like,
what is your answer to that question? I know you mentioned Mr. sort of beery flatulence made flesh a moment ago, but apart from him, what reasons have you come up with for yourself on how you were, to use your descriptions, how you were and how your dad were duped?
I don't know. I suppose. I don't know how to work. You just sort of listen to everything they say, didn't you? Like, it's 350 million. It's all blown up in your face. I felt like that was blown up in my face a lot more than what the Remain party was. And
yes.
I just listened to it, really.
And you didn't hear any voices from the other side, really, did you?
I didn't hear enough, anyway.
Didn't hear enough. Can I play a trick on you? Do you mind?
Go on.
The leader of the Labour Party's Remain movement was, Billy?
Leader part of the Labour movement? I don't even know.
There you go. Alan Johnson, who I love. I think he's a brilliant politician, but you don't even know. You could name now, off the top of your head, the top 5 leavers, all of whom told us we wouldn't have to leave the single market, all of whom were lying. And Billy's right. What's he going to do with his mates? He's dug in on this. He's dug in big fights. They made it so passionate. That was probably the problem, is that one side made it passionate and the Remain side didn't really. Maybe they should have done, I don't know. But, I mean, how much more passionate can you get than a dead MP? That for me, was the point at which I just thought, well, surely everyone's going to see what they're in danger of unleashing now. Within hours of that breaking point poster being unveiled, Joe Cox was murdered by a white supremacist terrorist. That didn't change the game either. So what the hell will? Dave's in Whitehaven. That's not in... have you got a by-election coming up, or is that just...
Yeah, it is, James. It's in Copeland, yeah.
All right,
yeah,
well, let's not...
The universe for the first time.
Centre of the universe. Enjoy your 15 minutes while it lasts, Dave. You even had the Prime Minister there on Wednesday, but we won't talk about that because I can never remember what the rules are. Talk to me about Tony Blair.
Well, just listening to your earlier callers, yeah, I think people who voted Remain like me need someone to champion the cause, and as we've sort of concluded, there's nobody there. It's just unfortunate. Blair sort of seems to be the only man who's picking up that mantle. He's damaged goods.
He is damaged goods
for a whole load of reasons. I mean, he came to power, you know, and really sort of accelerated, or certainly didn't do anything about the globalisation, which has resulted in where we find ourselves now. I mean, firms around here, there was chemical company, 1,000 people, millinery company, 500 people, all went abroad in the late 90s, early 90s, which was on Blair's watch.
Yes. It's the difference between what the graphs and the statistics say, and this has got Trump echoes as well, you know, because Obama's economic performance on paper has been exceptional, but it doesn't butter any parsnips for people who can't find a job or feel as if, you know, they're skint even though they're working.
Absolutely, you know, zero contracts, minimum wage. I mean, I was lucky I worked in the nuclear industry, so I'm retired now. But you know, that
can I
as well.
Dave,
yeah.
as a nuclear worker, a former nuclear worker, can I just ask you to cast your eye over this definition of uranium for me, please?
Right. We had Hillary Clinton give Russia 20% of the uranium in our country. You know what uranium is, right? It's a thing called nuclear weapons and other things. Like lots of things are done with uranium, including some bad things.
That's pretty strong, isn't it?
Well, it's typical of Trump. He's totally selective in what he says. You know, there's actually been a glut of uranium on the world markets for years now. So you know, whether Hillary gave it away or not, they could have probably got it.
But I mean, scientifically speaking, it's bad. It does things and bad things, and
it
yeah,
does good things as well. You know. But,
I love you, Dave. So Blair is damaged goods. Uranium does good things as well. Who else could have done what he did today, Dave? That's the problem, isn't it?
That's the problem. As I say, you know, it's just repeating what other people have said. You know, it's a case of, you know, the majority say out, and you lot don't count, and I think that is totally wrong, and will, you know, is just a seed for further problems as we go forward.
And that's the fear, and that's the kind of main reason why you can't just accept the result and move on, because you wonder where it goes next, especially when, if Dave and many people's fears turn out to be true, and we are about to commit an act of epic national self-harm, all of this anger and hatred that is currently directed at, well, touch wood, it's directed at the faceless institution that is the European Union, but we know that some of it is directed at individual people, with the audacity to speak Dutch in the street or Polish on a train or whatever it may be. And when the magical day doesn't dawn, when you realise there isn't going to be a magic unicorn delivered to your doorstep on the morning after we leave the European Union, where does that anger go? I got two fears. The first is obvious. The second is where the lies go next. And that's when I fear for the future of the welfare state and the NHS. I truly do. And I know that the NHS is playing a big role in the by-election that Dave will be voting in next week. Nice weather on the way, actually, next week, apparently. It'll be warmer than the Caribbean in parts of this country. Not that the Caribbean is particularly hot at this time of year, but still, if you're feeling the pinch, if you're feeling the freeze this week, that's slightly uplifting, reassuring news. So I wonder if anyone would file Tony Blair's intervention in the European Union debate under the same heading. Crazy busy on the phones, as you'd expect, but there are now a couple of lines free. So if you're desperate to have your say and you feel we've missed an important part of either conversation, the one about Donald Trump, and just the curious, what's the word I'm looking for? The curious reluctance of some people to see what's in front of their eyes. It's probably the uranium and the Electoral College comments, oddly, that I found most fascinating. He can actually stand up in front of the world's press and lie through his teeth and be proven to have lied twice, and I don't think it shifts a single mind among the faithful, among the hardcore faithful, and the same perhaps with the uranium comment. And then also Tony Blair's Brexit warning, his mission to prevent the company from undertaking what he considers to be, at best, a rush over the cliff's edge, and at worst, of course, an act of epic self-harm. 12:51 is the time. Alan is in Reigate. Alan, Blair or Trump?
Afternoon. I'd like to thank Tony Blair for guaranteeing that we leave and stay out of the EU.
Okay, I'll pass it on if you want. Have we got anything else to say?
Please do. I sent you a video, James, or I sent it to LBC, BBC and Sky News, which used some swear words at the same time as your words. Tony Blair wants to be president of the EU. That has been his...
What's in your video, Alan? What's in the video?
The video explains that the EU itself wanted to bring in a financial transaction.
Because I've been trying really hard to get hold of a copy of Free Willy 2.
Nah, Free Willy 2 is not around. You need to understand that we have an economy that will...
No, I do understand that.
...go after we leave. Absolutely.
Yeah, we do definitely have an economy.
No, it will definitely grow and go, James. You watch what happens.
Go where?
The financial side of the world that we have wanted, and so did the EU want, us in there. That's what Blair wants to try and re-cement. Because we, if we charge the financial transaction tax, could reset our UK economy. There is no doubt whatsoever we have the money and the resources to do that.
You mean the financial transaction tax that, wasn't it in the Labour manifesto 2 elections ago?
It's been in the European Union manifesto for the last 5 years, and it was in the Labour one. It's a Robin Hood tax. It will
So we could have voted for it. We could have voted for it. A couple of... I thought, didn't Britain veto? I thought Britain vetoed it.
Including the mainstream media tries to knock it down.
I like the idea, but I thought Britain vetoed it when the European Union tried to bring it in.
Yeah, because of Osborne and Cameron, of course they bloody well did, because they didn't want...
Right, so the European Union want the thing. They want the transaction tax.
They didn't want it.
No, they did.
The EU wants it. The EU voted for it on the 10th of October.
Exactly, and we vetoed it.
The Brexit vote on the 23rd of June. That's why Blair's trying to keep us in there and to become president.
But you don't want...
The EU will collapse within 3 years, and the euro will collapse this year after the German, French and Netherlands elections.
What month?
I would think by about November time, after the...
Before or after Bonfire Night?
No, yeah, probably after Bonfire Night. The euro will go down, but the EU itself within 3 years will go.
I just want to clarify. No, I'm sure you're not. I just want to clarify one thing: the financial transaction tax that the European Union wanted to bring in, but the British government didn't, is going to rescue our economy when we bring it in after leaving the European Union.
Absolutely, will do.
No, I did understand you the first time.
Travels through our financial transactions in the city and in the banking system.
Okay. I'll look out for the video. Have you seen Free Willy 2?
I wouldn't watch something like that. I'm afraid I'm too old.
It's about a whale, mate. It's not about... Well, I possibly gave you the wrong impression. 12:54 is the time. Henry is in Battersea. Me neither, Henry. What would you like to say?
Well, I'm very glad that Tony Blair's spoken up, because I agree, things don't look very promising for the anti-Brexiteers. I mean, a lot of people think, oh, well, we've decided, so we must get on with it. But 2 years is a very long time in politics. There are going to be changes on the continent over the next 2 years. And I think once it becomes clear the disadvantages of leaving suddenly become more real as the agreement starts to unfold, I think there's a chance that those of us who want to remain will get a voice, and I don't see why. It
will be too late, won't it, by then? I mean, they go into the negotiations after triggering triggling. That's a lovely word. Why hasn't someone used that word before? I'm going to go with triggling in future. It sounds less frightening than triggering. After triggling Article 50, they go into the negotiations. They discover fairly quickly that we are literally going to get whatever they agree to give us. We don't really have much bargaining power. She comes back, presents this to the country or to Parliament or to, to Paul Dacre at the Daily Mail. He probably gets first dibs on the big news. And they can't then say staying in would be better than this situation we will be in if we leave.
Well, they won't say that.
So who will? Can. Yeah, but they won't, though, and they're in charge. The government and the media are in charge, and they will not turn around and say, we'll be better off. Look, maybe there was some mythical deal that would have been better than what we've currently got, but we're never going to get that deal, so let's all stay in. You're just being rational, Henry. The age of rationality is behind us.
Well, I'm saying 2 years is a long time, and I don't care. I'm going to continue to fight for reason, and I think Tony Blair said the good thing, and I think Nick Clegg I support, and Ken Clarke, and I think we've all got to stick together. Someone said to me, am I allowed to say I support Remain the other day? I mean, we've all been bludgeoned down. We've got to stand up and argue the corner, and I agree it's not promising, but don't forget Article 50 can be revoked. We don't have to leave, and I think we should have a referendum that says, do you want to stay, do you want the new agreement, or do you want to crash out to WTO? I think we should have three choices, and I don't see why in 2 years we might possibly be able to get it.
Are you enjoying much success in your attempts to persuade individual people that they may have done something wrong, or have you not tried?
Well, no, the individual people you can't change, but I think that what I am surprised by is the large number of people who still remain extremely angry and feel we've been robbed, and I think we are a bit squished at the minute, but I think a lot of angry people like me, like me, feel we don't want to be squished anymore. We want to come up and we want to say our piece, and we think we're going to be proved right, and I'm going to go and argue. I don't accept the will of the people have spoken. I don't accept just because it's been a narrow majority we've got to pack up our bags and go home. I believe in Europe. I believe in all the vision thing. I think that it's progressive. I mean, there are lots of bad things about Europe, but on the whole, I think all getting together, my kids all want to be part of it, and I'm going to go on fighting it for as long as possible. And I think, as I say, in 2 years, a lot can change, and you never know. More power to you, Henry. Cheers, have a great weekend. And you describe the residual anger. The anger I find strangest is actually on the opposite side, from the people who won. You're sort of writing these articles about how, look, if things don't turn out to be very good, it'll be all Lily Allen's fault. That's been written and published in the Daily Mail as if they're already getting ready to pass the buck when the unicorns aren't delivered on the morning after the triggering of Article 50. That's the weird thing. I mean, the sort of... Well, I don't know quite what word to use, but if I'd won a battle, I'd be happy. Unless, of course, I thought I'd made a terrible mistake in winning. And then I'd probably be terrified, and so terrified that I masked my fear with anger. And my anger turned quickly into hatred, because anger leads to hatred. And what does hatred lead to? Where's Yoda when you need him? I meant Yoda. That's not my roundabout way of introducing Shelagh Fogarty.
My hair's a bit tatty, but even so.
On LBC Next you are.
Let's have just a little listen to some of what he said.
All I'm saying is a very, very simple thing. That if a significant part of that 52% show real change of mind, however you measure it, we should have the opportunity to reconsider this decision. Now, as I say, whether you do it through another referendum or another method, and that's a second-order question.
He went on to say, this issue is the single most important decision this country has taken since the Second World War. I think we'd all agree on that. And debate cannot be shut down about it. He didn't hold back about his own party. In the absence of an effective opposition, he said pro-Europeans need to build a movement reaching across party lines, adding that the institute he is launching would play its part in developing those arguments to rethink the country's position. And he says that, in his view, the debilitation of the Labour Party is the facilitator of Brexit. I hate to say that, but it's true, is what Tony Blair said. Now, it was interesting in James's programme an hour ago, or about 20 to 1 it would have been, listening to a caller, Billy, who said that he regretted his vote. I want to hear from you if you do regret your vote in the referendum, and very much if you still strongly feel that you are being talked down to by Tony Blair here, that you believe you did understand, that you feel you have a strong understanding of what the terms of that referendum were. And here he is, the former Prime Minister, telling you that you didn't. You didn't understand. 0345 606 0973 is the number. Text 84850 or tweet at LBC. Joe Carberry joins me, Co-Executive Director at Open Britain, and Matthew Ellery, Chief Research Executive at Get Britain Now. We'll talk to these guys for just a few minutes before I talk to you. Hello to you. Hello to both of you, Joe and Matthew. Hi.
Oh, hi.
Hi there. Hi. Tell me, Joe, first of all, your thoughts on what Tony Blair has said. Just a thumbnail sketch.
Well, I think Tony Blair said something rather simple but also incredibly logical, which is that if in 2 years' time the deal that the Prime Minister strikes with Europe and brings back is going to cause us economic pain and damage, and there are many people that think that we will, then people should have a right to look at that and say, well, we don't want to go through that. That's not in my personal interest. It's not in my national interest. Now, quite how that manifests itself, he was not specific about. What he was saying was that the debate over how we leave and whether or not leaving remains the best thing when we see what the Prime Minister negotiates should all remain on the table. And that seems to me sort of democratic and fairly logical.
Matthew Ellery.
I think it's quite clear what Tony Blair is actually doing. He wants to treat the 17.5 million voters who voted for Brexit with deliberate contempt. They voted for something that he didn't want, something that he didn't agree with. And as the former Prime Minister, he thinks of himself as smarter than the rest of the population and thinks his view should be the one adopted by the country. I think it's patronising, and I think it is fundamentally undemocratic, and I'm sure the rest of the country will believe that too.
But what's undemocratic about carrying on the conversation and further down the line in politics? Let's just think about another issue, not Brexit. Further down the line in politics, changing the way we do something, changing the decision we made previously on doing something. That happens all the time in a democratic way.
Well, no, not in this way. So I'll use a similar example that you've just used there, that we voted in a referendum to join the European Union back, or to remain a part of the European Union back in 1975. That didn't mean then that all Brexiteers had to stop believing in Brexit, but it meant that we had to accept the result. And that's what happened. People didn't go, oh, actually, despite the referendum, we're going to leave the European Union in any case. No. So people who support the European Union can continue to support the European Union, but they must accept that we are leaving the European Union.
Joe Carberry.
I mean, I think that argument doesn't really stand up to much scrutiny. I mean, we joined and we've had parties dedicated to taking us out of the European Union, so I'm not sure Matthew's really thought that through. But also, after a general election, if the Labour Party loses an election to the Conservatives, the Labour Party doesn't disappear. It continues making an argument that it believes in. Now, the strange thing about the Leave campaigners' argument today is that they have this great democratic moment where 33 million people voted on June the 23rd last year, and then they think that everything remains frozen in time, and that the power in this country transfers to 3 cabinet ministers who go to Europe, stitch up a deal, and no matter how damaging it is, everyone in this country needs to roll over and accept it. All Tony Blair is saying is, let's scrutinise that deal, let's see whether or not it remains in the best interests, and if it doesn't, there should be some sort of democratic check and balance to either improve the deal or to rethink the whole thing altogether. Now, I don't know why Matthew
I think it was your argument that was totally...
One at a time, guys, because nobody can understand what you say if you speak at the same time.
But let me just ask one question for the Leave campaigners and Matthew today. If you're so confident that Brexit's going to be a triumph, why aren't you just shrugging your shoulders at Tony Blair today and saying, well, Brexit's going to be so great for everyone, then it doesn't matter what Tony Blair thinks, everyone will be so pleased when we actually leave. I think that you understand the power of his argument and therefore you're in panic.
Right, Joe, thank you for letting me come in. The problem I had was with your initial comparison, saying it was like a general election. The reality is, it's like the Labour Party losing the election and then saying, right, we want another election straight away. We do not accept the mandate of the Tory victory. That is the comparison that is being made, that you're making. But that's what you're saying. You're saying that the Labour Party lost the election and therefore the Labour Party should call for another election. Referendum after referendum after referendum, such as happened in Ireland. That's the real problem with this. Once we leave the European Union and in 40 years' time, like us Brexiteers had to wait, then you can perhaps ask for us to rejoin.
All right, let Joe respond to that.
But we have to leave first of all.
Hold on. Let's be absolutely clear. Tony Blair did not call for a second referendum. He did not use the phrase second referendum. It is not the mission statement of Open Britain to have a second referendum. What he is talking about is having a democratic process whereby Parliament and the people are able to judge the outcome of these negotiations. He was not in any way specific about the second referendum. But you didn't answer the question that I put to you. The question I put to you is, if you're so confident that Brexit is a triumph, why do you care about what Tony Blair is saying.
Okay, go on, Matthew, respond. All right, Joe, let Matthew respond.
I'm more than confident that Brexit will be a triumph. I just don't need that to be validated again by another referendum so you can have more scare stories. Let's remember, Project Fear has been well and truly debunked. Unemployment is down, employment is up, and the economy is growing. The entire platform on which the Remain campaign stood on during the referendum has fallen away, and yet we still get the scare stories. We still get people like Tony Blair, who lied when he promised us a referendum on the constitutional treaty. He never gave that to us, and why on earth should we listen to him now?
Matthew, can I put a final thought to you, which is that in May of 2016, I think it was, Nigel Farage said in a 52-48 referendum in which Brexit lost, this would be unfinished business by a long way. If the Remain campaign wins two-thirds to one-third, that ends it. But if not, it doesn't. So, you know, he and his supporters like you and supporters of Brexit like you can't say that logic applies one day and not the next.
Well, I never said that, and the vast majority of Brexiteers never said that. That's a question you want to put to Nigel Farage.
What do you think of it?
Me. Well, I don't believe in having second referendums or referendums over and over and over again until you get the right result. If Farage said that, he was wrong, and I would have believed he was wrong right at the time.
What if it's not, just finally, what if it's not a referendum? What if down the line a new centre-left party emerges, maybe a renewed Labour Party, maybe something else, and stands on a platform in a general election of remaining in the European Union? If it wins, will you accept it?
No, because we've had a referendum. The referendum is a binary decision.
Yes, but I know that. But Matthew, in politics, as long as you obey the law, you are able to stand and put a political view to people on anything and ask for their votes. And if they vote for you in numbers and put you in power, you win. Now, if that happens in the form of a general election, then that's it, isn't it?
No, because we've had a referendum. I think a referendum is very, very clear. What do you want to do? And even the point on the single market...
Yes, but if in the form of a general election you were asked that question again, and a party says, I know the referendum has happened, but we're standing on this platform, and you win the votes...
And that's a party which is fundamentally undemocratic. That's quite
even though the same people are voting them in.
No, because if you have over 50% of the electorate, which happened with the Leave vote, you don't have that if you're a political party running. You know, the Labour Party might get 35% of the vote running on that ticket. It might win, but still a majority is for Leave.
Yeah, but it wasn't the whole electorate, was it, Matthew? Yes, but it wasn't the whole electorate, was it?
Well, yes, it was. Why wouldn't it be the whole electorate? It was 17.5 million people.
No,
but more than have voted for any political party in any general election ever.
But no, when you say the whole electorate, that sounds like the whole population, and no vote is ever the whole population. Yeah, but, no, but you know the distinction I'm making, just to be clear.
Yeah, well, I was very specific. I said the majority of the electorate, or the people who voted.
All right,
I think that's very clear.
All right, thank you. Matthew Ellery, Chief Research Executive at Get Britain Out, and Joe Carberry, Co-Executive Director at Open Britain. Loads of you calling in on this, so we'll get straight to your calls in just a few moments. Do you welcome Tony Blair's intervention here, or do you believe it is an affront to democracy? The time is 1:15. Putting the cat amongst the pigeons is what Tony Blair has done on Brexit today with his intervention. What do you make of it? Tommy in Camberwell, hello there.
Well, I'm just astounded that he's got the kind of hubris to still think that people take notice of him.
Well, they do, Tommy.
But we on the last show, Brian was talking about the lies that Trump tells. We have a man here who spoke to the whole world, took us to a war on a lie. 400,000 people killed, and he can get up there and then thought, well, you might change your mind now. There's been misinformation.
But
this is the king of
what do you think? Well, what do you think? What do you think the lie was? Because there's a distinction, and I'm not defending the Iraq War, but what there is a distinction between saying something you think is true and being wrong, and saying something you know to be untrue and saying it anyway.
Right. Say if he's so just misinformed that he believes it's the truth, then he's so naive. Because I remember at the time, the only other time I spoke to a radio station was then. This is the second time I've ever spoke. Because I knew, and I'm just a bricklayer, but I knew we were going in there not to help those people, not to find necessary like weapons of mass destruction, but for oil. And I was proved right. And I was a bricklayer. So how could he not see that? So that's no excuse. No excuse that he listened to the CIA. No excuse that he listened to the MI5, because he should have known better. And so when we get angry about Trump, we get angry about his lies. He's lying about how many delegates or how much the college system worked. We're talking about a lie that has destroyed countries, completely destabilized regions.
But you didn't quite respond to the distinction I drew between the two things. A lie told when you know something to be untrue and you tell it anyway, and a lie, what you would regard as a lie when it's just something you truly believed was the case and turned out to be wrong. They're different things, aren't they?
Yeah, yes, morally, yeah, you could try and, you might not be convicted for that. Maybe in the eyes of God, it looks a little.
Well, one is a lie and one is a mistake, and you can be heavily criticised for mistakes.
Yeah, hold on, listen. A mistake that leads to 300,000 people losing their life, countries destabilised, and listen, it could be even worse then, because listen, whichever way, he has no credibility, does he? Really? Come on, how could this man be credible? This shows how desperate, desperate the Remain people are. That this is the best they could find to put up today. He's the best that they could find to bring this argument. Listen, there should be an argument for Remain. It should be a progressive argument. It should be how much we're strong together, how much it helps us, not fear. That was their problem. That was the problem because they just.
Yeah, well, it was both sides' problem, Tommy. Remember the poster and all those immigrants in a big row behind Nigel Farage?
Yeah.
So, listen, everyone played the fear game.
Yeah. Listen, I know what Nigel Farage is. He is what he is, isn't he? You can see what he is.
Well, you tell me what he is. What do you mean? Tell me what he is.
Well, he is a right wing. Listen, I don't know if he's prejudiced. I've never heard him say that. But to my view, I would probably say, he's probably got a circle of people that probably don't reflect my circle of friends. But still, all in all, this is the man that they've brought up now is Blair. And this man if he hasn't lied, he's deceived. And the pride that he must have, the hubris that he thinks he can still go out and talk to people and people's going to take notice to him. And just another little point there is there's a bubble that the political classes and the media have been in this last few years. There's two different kind of people in the world. There's talkers and there's doers. And the politicians and media, they attract talkers. And so people in this bubble still think they've got this, and that's why they've lost Brexit, that's why they've lost with Trump, and they're probably going to lose with Le Pen and the Dutch guy, Wilders.
Well, we'll see. I mean, yeah, you might be right. We'll see. Interesting times coming up. Thank you, Tommy, for your call. Tommy in Camberwell. Don't leave it so long next time, Tommy. Only a second time on the radio, and both times about Tony Blair. Lord Roger Liddell joins me now, Labour member of the House of Lords, member of the Lords European Select Committee, and he was Tony Blair's European advisor as well. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. After that, I feel a little humbled coming on your programme.
In what sense?
Well, I thought the previous Tommy that you spoke to was so virulent about Tony Blair. I think Tony Blair is perfectly entitled to express his views. He's a former Prime Minister. He was a very successful Prime Minister for most of his period in office. And I just don't think that the fact that, what a lot of people now think was a great mistake over Iraq, that shouldn't mean that you just don't listen.
The thing is, though, it would be great if he didn't feel the need to intervene. It would be great if he wasn't required to intervene.
What do you mean by that?
Well, he said it himself. He said it himself. The Labour Party's debilitation is allowing for this,
Of course. No, former prime ministers intervene on things that they think are absolutely central to the national interest, and I think that's right and proper. On the question of the Labour Party, yes, I think the Labour response on Brexit is rather divided and weak. I think that Tony, what he said about Labour is absolutely right. I'm afraid I regret that, but I think it's right.
So, what do you see? I mean, my own view, and I said it at the very top, is that I think there is only ever value in debate, and he said the debate starts here now because the debate that went through Parliament left a lot of people, and I include myself on that list, quite unsatisfied. And unimpressed. So that debate that he says we need, and that movement and that institute that he's setting up, that Remain movement, What will it do? What will it look like? What will he do in it?
Sorry, let's go one step back there. I think that it's clear that Mrs. May, as a result, Theresa May, our Prime Minister, as a result of the referendum, has a mandate to open negotiations with the EU for our withdrawal. I think that is correct democratically. However, the assertion that's made by the Brexiteers is that whatever deal she comes up with, and even if she comes with no deal, the decision on exit from the EU has been taken, come what may, and we have to accept it. Now, I don't think that's democratic. I think that we have to have a debate about what the exit deal is. We have to see whether the promises that were made by the Leavers in the referendum have been delivered in that deal. For instance, they said we could enjoy free trade with Europe. Well, will that be the case? And if it isn't the case, we know it's going to do great damage to our national interests. So isn't it right and proper to have that debate?
And what will it look like is my question to you. What will happen now? Because Parliament so far has been proved to be a bit of a damp squib on this front. So where will this debate take place?
I understand the argument of people who think that because of the referendum, Mrs. May has a right to demand that Parliament supports invoking Article 50 and opening negotiations with the EU. I understand that argument, but what I refuse to accept is the argument that this means that we withdraw on any basis that the Conservative government comes up with. I don't accept that at all.
There are many ways to leave. Thank you, Lord Roger Liddell, for your time. Labour member of the House of Lords, member of the Lords European Select Committee, and was Tony Blair's European advisor as well. Ian has called from Redhill. Hello, Ian.
Oh, hey, how you doing? You all right?
Yeah, fine, thank you. Do you welcome Blair's intervention or not?
No, I'll be honest with you, I really don't. I mean, for many reasons, I'm not keen on the guy, and we all know that he wanted to kind of like restart his wanting to lead the Labour Party again. That was quite recent, and I'll be honest with you, with the amount of people that wanted to, with the country.
Hang on. You believe he wants to lead the Labour Party again?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, and I think I'm not imagining it, but I think certainly within the last 6 months there was noises.
Well, yeah, I mean, he said he wouldn't rule out a return to politics, but that's not the same, is it?
Absolutely.
But that's not the same.
Well, the thing is, people get a sniff of power and they like it, and that's really what we're dealing with. And I see this really: half of the country want to stay, half the country want to go. The vote has been made. We're leaving, hopefully. Now, I see this as him just basically using a backdoor way of getting into power and leading the Labour Party. That's what I see. That's the way I see it. I'm sorry, and I can't believe no one else does.
All right. Well, do you agree with him at least that a debate can be had about the manner in which we leave?
I think we should. We certainly need some transparency on what the views are as to how we should progress. Absolutely. But should someone who has obviously got it so badly wrong in the past and is so full of their own.
But he didn't get everything wrong, Ian.
No, but he got an awful lot wrong. As your previous caller said, lots and lots and lots of people have died as a result of his getting something wrong.
Well, that's a very specific thing, isn't it, that he got wrong?
Well, it is a very specific thing, but it's a very specific amount of people that died, isn't it, as well?
It is, yeah, I know, I'm not minimising it, but it is.
But that's what you have to
itself, isn't it?
So the question is, do we trust him? And I think that's the main question here, I think, when it comes to Mr. Blair. Do we trust him?
And you don't.
And indeed, no, I don't.
All right, Ian, thank you. I'll leave it there if I may. It's time for the news headlines. Ian in Redhill, he does not trust Tony Blair. He does not welcome this intervention on Brexit. Do you? UKIP Spring Conference is underway. Peter Whittle, Deputy UKIP leader, joins me now to talk about it for a little while. Hello.
Hello there, Sheila.
Hello. Your new leader, Paul Nuttall, spoke. What did you tell us what he said? Tell us what you make of what he said.
Well, I mean, Paul's had quite a difficult week, as you'll be aware. It was simply a brilliant speech. He obviously was talking about the campaign in Stoke for the by-election next week, but he was also talking more broadly about why UKIP is needed now. And in fact, it's obviously we all believe UKIP is needed more than ever when it comes to Brexit. As Paul put it, we've got to be the backbone of the negotiations. We've actually got to hold the government's feet to the fire. And I think that what has been really striking about this conference in Bolton is the level of unity and the level of support for Paul, which is, fantastic. And indeed, he's proving to be a great leader.
What's the feeling amongst delegates about Tony Blair's intervention? I'm asking my listeners about it this hour.
Well, I mean, we're getting used now, aren't we, to these sort of establishment figures, saying the sort of things that Blair has said. This is, exactly really what I mean when I say that we're needed now more than ever, that essentially you have these people essentially trying in some way or another to delay or indeed thwart, what was an absolutely democratically a result.
Yeah, the thing is, Tony Blair isn't hiding that, is he? He isn't hiding the fact that he wants to stay in Europe. He isn't hiding the fact that he thinks that despite the referendum result itself, the conversation, the debate continues, and in democracies we can turn our heels and change our minds, and that's always been the case. What's UKIP's particular response to that?
Well, up to a point, Sheila, but I mean, the thing is that it's not really the point. I mean, this is all predicated on the idea that somehow or other people, when they voted, did not know what they were voting for or whatever. And I mean, I think that this is incredibly condescending to people. They knew what they were voting for. They wanted to vote to leave the EU, lock, stock and barrel. They wanted to leave the single market. They wanted
well, you say lock, stock and barrel. Well, that wasn't the message that was being put out by some of the Leave campaigners, was it? Some senior Leave campaigners. It wasn't lock, stock and barrel.
It was absolutely that. I mean, it was made absolutely clear that if we came out of the EU, we would be leaving the single market. That was made clear by the Remain campaign, from the Chancellor Exchequer downwards.
Yes, but it was countered by, and I include your former leader, Nigel Farage, in this, it was countered by him and others in leadership positions saying, it doesn't have to be that way. We can leave and we can get a deal in which we have this, this, this and this. And then what do you know? Theresa May just says no, lock, stock and barrel.
Well, no, but I mean, the thing is that she, to be fair, although with Theresa May, I always want to see the walk after I've heard the talk with her. But the fact is that, she's right in the sense that she recognises a democratic vote when she sees it. And the problem with Theresa May, there are all sorts of other problems, and that is that she says the right thing. Whether she will actually do it is another matter. But to get back to whether it's Blair or whether indeed it's the Lib Dems, whether it's Labour, no one quite knows what they think about it. Essentially, people who did not want to leave the EU are still reeling in a way from the shock of it.
But what about people
sort of denying the result?
But what about people who accept that we're leaving the EU and still want to have a say about how we do that?
But the thing is when you say how we do it, it's sort of it's clear. It's not, if you like...
there's lots of ways of leaving the EU, aren't there? That we can go and fight for. We can go and negotiate.
No, yes, of course. But the thing is that it's not a question of what we should be pleased to get from the EU.
I didn't say that. That wasn't my language. Quite the opposite. My language was that a lot of Remain campaigners and politicians want the government to go in and fight for a version of Leave that does least damage to this country and gives best options for this country. Now, Theresa May has made it clear she thinks hard Brexit is that. Others disagree. Now, it's not about arguing to stay in. It's about arguing for the manner in which we get out.
No, but you just sort of really made the point there, maybe without knowing it. You said with the least damage. Why is it going to be damaging?
I also said best opportunity immediately afterwards in the next breath. That's what negotiations are about. When I negotiate my contract here, I want the best opportunities for me and the least damage to me. It's just contractual. It's just fighting your corner, isn't it?
But it's quite clear. Look, until the triggering of Article 50, which in itself took much longer than it should have done. It should have been done the morning after. It was no reason why it shouldn't have been done. Anyway, here we are 8 months later. The fact is that it is not a case of saying, right, well, people have sort of basically just sort of said what they kind of feel or something like that, and it's up to us to actually interpret it. It's quite clear. People wanted our sovereignty back. They wanted the control of our borders back, control of our fisheries back, and indeed, obviously, in the fullness of time, our passports back. That was absolutely clear. And I think that, this is all, in a way, the product of the kind of media political class effectively muddying the waters. People, for example, were perplexed by what is this talk of hard Brexit, soft Brexit, red, white and blue Brexit, all of these things. This was just hot air. I think people know what they were voting for.
Can I ask you about something much more day-to-day, much more humdrum? Fish and chips. VAT on fish and chips announced today by Paul Nuttall. Why? What's the thinking there?
VAT off fish and chips. Basically taking VAT. There's a whole number of things. Far more importantly, you might say, we would take VAT off domestic energy, because there's the huge bills now, which basically people are faced with, but also off sanitary products, and also, for that matter, hot takeaway food.
And the extra billions, the commitment to spend extra billions of pounds a year on the NHS and social care, how will that be funded specifically?
Well, it's quite simple. Without wishing to be complacent at all about this, we utterly believe in the National Health Service. What is, I would say, totally indefensible at the moment, when we are facing the crisis that we have in the National Health Service, and which unfortunately comes on a yearly basis now, it is indefensible that we are sending something like 12 to 15 billion pounds a year in foreign aid to countries such as Brazil, such as India, which do not need that level of foreign aid, particularly when they have their own space programs.
So foreign aid ends, NHS begins. Yeah.
No, we would slash it hugely. We would keep a certain amount, because this country has always been a compassionate country, no question. Humanitarian disasters, things like that.
But give less.
What we would do instead is use. We've already pledged £3 billion more out of that budget to the NHS, and about 1.2 billion on social care.
All right, Peter, thank you. Peter Whittle, Deputy Leader of UKIP. Luke has called from Weybridge, who wants to talk about Tony Blair's intervention on Brexit. Hello, Luke.
Hi there.
Hi. How do you see it? How do you read that intervention by Tony Blair?
Well, I mean, I don't like the guy very much. I don't think he's a great human being, but I have to agree with what he's saying, because I just don't understand how this whole referendum process has kind of crashed on through. It's been, in my mind, a complete miscarriage of democracy. The way that politicians have behaved around it has been just vile and disgusting. There's such a naked desire for power. They'll do anything. I mean, Boris Johnson, made a calculated gamble that supporting Brexit was what was going to get him the PM's job. And then when it sort of came about, nobody wanted it, and it was sort of Theresa May was left standing. I don't think we've had a good democratic process, and we've got all these people clinging on to this marginal victory in the advisory referendum, and on the basis of that, we'll crash through. We've even got, the Labour Party on a 3-line whip to support the government. It's not been a good democratic process.
It's Alice in Wonderland, confusing, isn't it?
Well, it is. It has been confusing, but I think it's more that I just haven't seen any real moral backbone in many politicians at all, and I just think the whole sorry lot of them have let us down completely. I really do.
But you back Blair essentially on this, even though you're not a fan.
I agree with what he's saying, that we need better debate. I think that people who supported staying need to stand up and have more of a conversation. It seems to become fashionable to say, oh well, just get on with it then. And actually, I don't think that we do. I still think this is one of the worst mistakes we're ever going to make, and it just on a really slim margin. Actually, the threshold for leaving should have been much higher in terms of the number of people that turned up to vote, or at least what the percentage was that we hit.
Okay, thanks. Thank you for your call, Luke. I'll leave it there if I may. Is Blair making a political comeback as much as trying to force the continuation of a debate in his image on Brexit? Dave has texted. He texted during a previous conversation I was having with one of you, in which you made it clear that you believe he actually wants to be the leader of the Labour Party, and that's all this is. This is a kind of cover for that. This guy is spot on, says Dave, referring to that call. Blair has a messiah complex and will see himself saving the party and the country. Well, here to talk more about this with me is our senior reporter, Vincent McAviney. You were there at the speech this morning. What was the feeling like in the room, the atmosphere in the room?
Tony Blair said it felt surreal to be standing there, and it was actually quite odd being in the audience because a number of his old staff were there, press officers and policy advisors, and even his wife Cherie was sort of looking on as he gave a speech on the stage where David Cameron 4 years ago had made his own sort of Brexit referendum speech. And the former Prime Minister has made a habit of popping up like once a year to test the sort of toxicity in the political waters. He did it for Gordon Brown, the Scottish referendum, the sort of 2015 general election. And I think this was, message aside, another confident performance by him. He's still got the charm. He can still work a room. He got quite a bit of applause there. But he's also always been an effective communicator. And he gave an analogy which for me was a kind of standout moment of this morning.
It's like a house swap. They said, yep, we want to swap our house. But they hadn't seen the other one. They'd had one group of people tell them, this other house is fantastic, you should definitely move there. And another group of people say, no, it's a really bad idea, I wouldn't do that. So what do? They heard two people, they decided to go with the person that told them it was fantastic. But here's the thing, now they're going to go and see it. Right? Now they're going to go and visit the neighborhood. Now they're going to go and test the structure. Now they're going to go and see whether it's the type of move they really want to make. The idea that in those circumstances, if they decide, you know what, I think this is not such a great neighborhood, not really liking the structure, don't think it's got the right bedrooms for us and the facilities, it's going to cost too much to do it up. What, they can't change their mind? No, you made your decision, you just got to do it. No, stop debating it, don't think about it anymore. Boys, who made that rule?
Who made that rule?
Indeed, and that was quite a classic sort of Blair, simple talking to the voter example of how he used to communicate. But whether or not he is the right messenger for Open Britain is up for debate. And he's divested control of all his foreign consultancy businesses, which were quite controversial. He's not working for the Quartet in the Middle East anymore. And he said he wants to focus on domestic politics. So there was a question of, well, what's he actually going to do? And that didn't really get cleared up this morning. What he did do was make it clear he's not setting up a new political party, but he called himself a practicing politician, which I thought was interesting in one answer. And he twice criticised the current Labour Party.
Look, obviously all of this would be easier if you were in a position where there was an opposition party that looked capable of challenging the government for its position, which on the polling obviously is not the case at the moment. But nonetheless, this is a sufficiently big issue that I think part of what we're doing today and part of what we will do in the months to come is building the links so that you have a movement of people out there on the ground in the public debate saying, here are the facts, let's think again.
I wonder whether he is angling for that. I wasn't convinced when our caller said it earlier on. I couldn't envisage it. But when he put it to me, I did think of, gosh, going back 15 years or more, when Jacques Chirac re-entered French politics after retiring, after calls for him to do so. Now, we don't hear clarion calls for Blair to do so, but I wonder if they came from somewhere, would he respond to them?
I think it would be quite remote corners that would respond to them. I think there still is the problem. And if you look through the tweets today, many of them also referencing Iraq, which will always loom over him. But I think he is really looking for an active role to play. We know he's setting up this new institute and he's worked this morning with Open Britain, but it'll be whether or not he carries on with this. I thought the location this morning, there was obviously a symmetry with the sort of Cameron speech, and if you're a Westminster watcher, you kind of got that, why he was there. But I think to anyone watching out in the country, being in the sort of Bloomberg headquarters, it looked very corporate, it was a very nice building. There's a disconnect there. It made him look again Mr. Davos. I think if he's going to carry on doing this, he needs to go out a bit more. He was asked this morning, when's the last time you sort of went on the doorsteps and talked to people? And he said, well, frankly, I don't do that anymore. I can't really do that.
But that's too much like campaigning.
That's too much like campaigning. Isn't it? But it would be interesting to see, if he carries on with his campaigning, is he going to go out to the country and make speeches? It would have in a way, been more natural for him to go to the north, to his old constituency and make that speech, and he might have been a bit more kind of effervescent. But I think he doesn't really know what he's going to do with it, and we'll see whether or not he does actually go out now and talk to the country and see what people think.
Tickling it to see what the reaction is, maybe.
I think so, yeah.
Thank you, Vincent McAvenny, who was at that speech this morning. We've been talking about it this hour. Robert has called from Medway in Kent. Hello, Robert.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks. Do you welcome... first of all, do you think he should have a voice, whether you agree with what's coming out of his mouth or not?
I don't. I completely disagree with what's coming out of his mouth. Sadly, he was one of my first votes, and I regret that now. But anyway, he has got a right to speak, as do all the Remainers, and they do very often. As do all the Leavers. But I do think this is being caused and has been caused by the simple issue where the MPs didn't hold up to their volition. They didn't resign. If they'd have resigned as being an MP to cause a by-election, and the whole of all of those people who believe so strongly in Remain, it would have forced the general election, and then most of these arguments would be over, because we'd have a government that we elected after a Brexit referendum, and most of these issues and quandaries and worries would be over, because we'd have parties in place and people that we elected after the debate, and it's just going to continue until this is done.
I agree with you. I think that I'm surprised that Theresa May hasn't gone to the country, because it looks, that it would be a walk-in, just to do it. But I agree with you. I think things would be calmer if the government of the day could say, right, we had an election, our position on Brexit, and you voted us in, let's get on with it. I think it would strengthen the situation, wouldn't it? Certainly from the Brexiteers' point of view and the government's point of view.
Yes, I mean, I have to wholeheartedly say this, and obviously in the same sense that if people want a stronger UKIP in Parliament, then obviously they would get to vote it. We're only having to be able to have little dribs and drabs of these little by-elections, which I won't go into that because of sheer electoral rules. But
oh dear.
Yeah.
Your attention is being diverted by the sounds of it, Robert,
Yes, my little girl, she's playing out the front. And I put one up in the flat and on the hallway, so I don't either.
It's all happening in Medway. Yeah. Listen, I'll leave it there if I may, Robert, but thank you for your call, Robert in Kent. Rightly pointing out that Stoke by-election. I should have said to you earlier on that on the website at lbc.co.uk you can see a list of all of the candidates for that Stoke by-election upcoming. And there's one in Copeland as well, isn't there? So we'll, when the results of that come in, of course, stay with LBC for all the reaction to it and analysis of what it means. Dan has called from Leicester. Hello, Dan.
Hi, Sheila. How you doing?
Hey, I'm very well, yeah.
Yeah, jolly good. So the thing I'd say about Tony Blair is I really don't want us to get into the territory of disqualifying the possibility of a debate because it was Tony Blair that suggested it. We can't not talk about Brexit because of Iraq. That would be ridiculous. But it's entirely possible that we go down that route. The thing that I like about what Tony Blair said is that he's raised this possibility of talking about whether Brexit is the right vehicle to achieve the stuff that the referendum stirred up. So sort of problems with our borders, sovereignty, political union with the EU, all that stuff. I personally reckon a case could be made for solving all of those without leaving the EU. And that's the talk that we're not having.
And do you believe that if Europe offers those things in the negotiations, that Theresa May will, in a cat in hell's chance of her saying, "Oh, okay, then we don't need to leave"?
Well, that's the point. I don't say, for example, immigration. The Lisbon Treaty has bits in place that mean that we can exercise tighter controls of our borders. We don't need Brexit for that. David Cameron secured no further political union with the EU in his renegotiation. We don't need Brexit for that. Parliament's always been sovereign. Theresa May said that in her white paper.
All right, Dan, I'm going to leave it if I may. Thank you. Really strong call to finish on there, actually, making some very salient points. Thank you, Dan, in Leicester.